last time I was talking on the topics of economics, and I was mentioning that household activities and volunteering activities were basically which are not part of market interactions, were not included into the economics topics usually. And basically, I mean, at first this might seem a little bit normal to you, basically, because you might think that the economics is on market activities, on activities that include money anyway. However, if you think the more broad definition of economics, economics is the transformation of the resources a society has to the wants and needs of the society. While in market economy, we might say that market capitalism, market is the most important institutions that does this transformation. There are also other mechanisms, other institutions, other social settings where this transformation happens. Volunteer activities are part of that, for example. And in today's world with internet, increasingly they become more important. Their importance doesn't match with the importance of the market activities for now. I mean, it's still very small, but it is growing. Household activities, for example, I mean, in many ways, market has taken over those activities, and once those activities are taken over, they become more visible economic activities. But before market took over, those activities, while they were inside of the house, they were still activities that were transforming the resources to the wants and needs of the society. For example, I mean, in Sumerian era, thousands years before, people were given as wage grain, I mean, the input of the bread, and wool, input of the clothing. And people were expecting to transform those to the wants and needs. So basically, I mean, the whole the economic system where the payments are made, wages are paid, are also connected to these other aspects, other let me say settings of the economic system, and not seeing them, and that's one of the critique of the feminist economics. Make even the analysis of the market system not complete, because you don't see those connections that are affecting the market system. Lastly, on this, actually, Nelson did not brought much, but economic pedagogy is another, I mean, teaching especially of economics is another thing. I mean, this rigid knowledge which is presented by one instructor, and basically everyone else in the room are learning that rigid structure, rigid knowledge. It can be rather than the knowledge can be more flexible, and basically it can take shape or be understood better while with the contribution of everyone in the classroom, with discussion, with applications. For example, in engineering, it is taught that, I mean, when you know the theories and theories models, you might learn them inside of the class, but they are nothing up. Your knowledge is half before you start to apply them yourself. Well, to some extent, that kind of application, even to the discussions, even to the current problems, even done inside of the classroom setting, might make economic knowledge in economics also better, more fruitful. So, I mean, the economic pedagogy might change by making education more interactive and finding ways to make education more interactive and making the knowledge also more flexible. I mean, allow each student to get the knowledge given uh, through their own filter of understanding, basically. Allowing, I mean, the information to take different shapes, to be applied differently by different people. Of course, this alternative economic pedagogy is a subject of much discussions. Even people who are kind of defending it, I mean, who say, well, maybe it might be good in private. They say economics is not suitable for different type of pedagogy. I mean, traditional type of teaching is still necessary for economics, and basically, I mean, as I said, the alternative teaching methods are developing, and some I don't know, at certain places they might be taking shape. In certain departments, they might be tried, basically. But I don't know any economics departments where those alternative teaching methods are actually used, especially in an extensive way. Even if discussions are part of the teaching, in-class discussions, online discussions, projects, things like that, the basic lecturing part is still done, and it is done pretty much in a traditional way. So how this interactive teaching can be organized is a big question, and you might also ask that question yourself, especially if you are interested in being a academician in future. Let's continue. Now, this is the end of Nassim, and this is basically how she applied this male bias idea to the different aspects in economics. And in some cases, actually, especially when the methods, economic pedagogy might be the basic thing, I mean, where this whole structure of teaching is settled and applied for many, maybe more than 200 years, basically. It is difficult to make changes. And even women who might be part of, who might at least get understand the feminine characteristics we have mentioned better, and they might even maybe appreciate their potential use in teaching, might resist in that case. I mean, they might say, I mean, traditional teaching methods are not easy to change, basically. Now we can start looking to the second paper, which is the paper of Starr. And in that paper, she mentioned, basically qualitative methods, and she discussed whether the qualitative methods can be useful for the economics, both as by themselves, but also as complements of the quantitative methods. I mean, when they use together, basically. And she also discussed whether the qualitative methods are weaker than the quantitative methods. She gives examples of the qualitative methods. One of them is in-depth interview. In-depth interview is a kind of interview where you don't ask questions like, for example, tell me which one of them describes your reason to come to university. A, for example, education. B, this. C, that. This is not in-depth interview. when you give basically choices to the people. In-depth interview is rather like describe me in a paragraph, in two paragraphs, even sometimes limitless way, why you decided to study at the university. And the person is allowed to describe his or her reason in full, in his own or her own words, which makes, of course, the analysis of it more difficult because now we cannot just basically take the choices and say, okay, 10 people have said this, chosen this C, 5 people have chosen A, basically. Although, when we read the description, chances are high we get more deep knowledge on why the person has chosen to study at the university. When we have A and C, for example, let's say to get a better wage is might be one reason. Get a better, enjoying student life, that might be the reason for that person to come to the university. The person might have chosen C, but he might also would like to get A, for example. And the reason why the person wants to enjoy student life might also be, there might be something we don't see there. For example, some people might have troubles inside of the family, and that's why they might want to go to the university and spend more time at the university. Some people, the city they live might not provide sufficient, for example, sufficient level of, let's say, activities they can join. So there can be much more knowledge behind this I want to enjoy student life choice, but we are not able to see that. Qualitative interview, the in-depth interviews might allow us to see that. Focus groups where we set a question, we guide the group to some extent, and at certain points we set it free to discuss the answer of the question, basically. Case study, which is sometimes done in economics. This is one of the most used more extensively in economics, where you basically look to one specific case. Usually in macroeconomics it is done. For example, a specific economic crisis at some part of the history. But even in microeconomics, sometimes certain companies or certain interesting examples like Wikipedia case can be studied as a case, and how the theories are basically can be used to explain them, and where they fail, and can there be potential new explanations be brought to explain the case study. The case, those questions might be part of the case study. Basically, we try to understand the process of the case, basically. Field work, where we basically go to the field, and that might be we go to the factory, and we might observe the factory. We might even participate in the factory as if we are a member of the labor force. Although, even if we participate, we are not actual members of the labor force. Having a life of a worker in the factory is different from participating there for even a year or 2 years. So that's another thing. Many people have done this actually, especially in anthropology. It is done very, very extensively. Some famous works on anthropology are using this method. And life history, where basically you study the story of a life of an individual, which might be a slave, for example. And when you study a life history of a slave, you might get a lot of information on slavery, basically. So all of these methods are used in certain sciences. And, we will discuss them more in the next parts.